You're listening to The Dealmaker's Edge with AY Strauss, diving deep into stories behind commercial real estate leaders. Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Dealmaker's Edge. Today, I'm super excited to welcome Dan Kodsi to the podcast. Dan has been the CEO of Royal Palm Companies, or RPC. Under Dan's leadership, RPC has developed over $3.5 billion in completed projects to date, with over $2 billion in the pipeline of development. During the last 3 decades, Dan has delivered over 6,000 units, consisting of over 14 million square feet of mixed use and master plan communities, hotels, multifamily, and high-rise developments. Dan's known for identifying underserved markets, alongside of his ability to execute large-scale mixed-use developments and master plan communities. In 2011, Dan founded Participant Capital as the capital arm of RPC and as a vehicle to empower individual investors to participate in ground-up construction projects. Throughout his career, Dan has been credited for changing skylines with his award-winning projects and has created several branded residences, including the Paramount brand that includes 3 distinct properties, including the recently completed and internationally renowned Paramount Miami World Center, which is the second largest master plan urban project in the U.S., and RPC and its latest branded residence, Legacy Hotel and Residences, which is Miami World Center's newest mixed-use tower that will overlook the heart of downtown and offers both buyers and investors a unique blend of business models across hospitality, real estate, preventative healthcare, and wellness that work financially independently, but also creates a special asset ecosystem that appeals to the new disease-conscious traveler. Dan, I know that was a long bio, but honestly, with your background, it could go on for a long period of time. We just had to end it eventually. But All kidding aside, it's terrific you're here. And I know our listeners are going to be pumped to hear your story and these exciting projects. So now you're going to do most of the talking.
All right. Thanks for having me, and I look forward to having this conversation. So let's do it. I'm assuming you have some questions.
I do have a few. And again, there's so many big projects you've done, and we can focus on so many. But I think to start off, this is geared towards up and coming investors, developers, people getting started in real estate, maybe in the early stages. Maybe you could talk about how you just got started. I read about it and we talked about it, and you got started from a very young age in commercial real estate and development specifically, but maybe you could share some of that background with people.
Yeah, so I did. I actually, even as a kid, I worked construction when I was a young kid. My uncles and my father and everyone was, doing small construction jobs. And I was an ambitious young kid. For $2-3 an hour, I did some labor in the hot Florida sun. It wasn't a lot of fun, but I did it for a few years. When I was younger, I was actually supervising a job when I was 16. But of course, that incentivized me to go to college. I got my degree at the University of Miami. I had a real estate finance degree, also urban planning and architecture. My passion was really, I like the design and urban planning, but I always felt that no romance without finance, and needed to understand the financial aspects and the capital side of real estate, because as we know, real estate's really capital intensive. So after college, started building projects with friends and family, building a track record. My goal was to always build a large entity corporation where we can build multiple projects. And as you can see in my career, I've developed quite a few very large scale projects, which was my ultimate goal as I started. But of course, at the beginning, you have to start with smaller projects and work your way. You're not building the Paramount Miami World Center, $500 million+ project on your first try. And that's after a lot of years of grinding through a lot of smaller projects and then building your way up to it. That's, a lot of how I got started.
Perfect. And it tends to be a trend I noticed that oftentimes the more successful people are, the more modest they are. So not to belabor the early beginnings, but I understand at 16, you were supervising construction of a beachfront hotel. By 22, you had a successful property management company. You had, by 23, managing over 500 rental apartments with a staff of 22 people. I mean, you were enterprising really early, very young, and you were running real projects and with your hands and brains. It wasn't just theoretical spreadsheets. You were literally working on these projects and from literally the ground up. So
yes,
really cool to see.
I was. And your point to being humble, when you're young and inexperienced and you screw up a lot, you get a lot of humbling experiences. I think that's probably why people that are successful have had a lot of trials and tribulations, and they realize that it's not easy. And when you take risks, you fail. Failing is part of growing and being part of a business, but it is what humbles you. And that's why a lot of times I have people that work for me and they've got all the confidence in the world. They've just probably failed as many times. And so it is interesting when you say that. But yes, I did from a very young age. I was very ambitious. I always liked to build companies. That's why I got into property management at first, where I wanted to build a property management. We were doing apartments at the time and I wanted to manage them myself. And so having the ability to build an organization where we could do property management. And by the way, that management company is still in existence today, even though we don't manage as many units as we did in the past, just because being busy with development, large scale projects, the property management side of the business is not something that I was really focusing on, obviously in the past for a long while now.
Yeah. And after you started that at 23, I know your background at 24, you're running 7 projects, single family housing developments, competing with the major national home builders and really doing everything, soup to nuts. And then it seems like, in your mid 20s, when you really started to navigate towards going that institutional funds route, which is really precocious. You really don't see the institutions like to back people in their 20s, but it seems like in the late 90s, you saw this new urbanism concept. And maybe you could talk about what excited you about that and some of the early developments.
Yeah, so it was interesting in the state of Florida in the 90s, there was no demand for, my passion was urban, getting an urban planning degree and studying urban planning, urban development. It was my passion. I was looking at cities. I went to University of Miami, pretty decent cities here in South Florida, even through the state of Florida. And that was my passion. But in the 90s, there was no demand. We were still building our suburbs in Florida. So there was no demand. In other words, today, if you just look at the landscape today, why is urban development so successful in places like South Florida? And that's really because we ran out of land. You can't build Broward County, Dade County. You can't build single family homes. You can't build garden apartments unless you're going vertical. There's really no room for development. And so vertical development is really where it is. But I was one of the first. I was a pioneer in developing urban development as soon as I saw that trend happening. It was right around the late 90s, where you saw there was a new urbanism was kind of the talk of the development industry. And I wanted to get ahead of it. And even I was young, even the late 90s, I was just, my late 20s, just about to turn 30. There was a project in downtown West Palm Beach that was, still manageable. It was probably only about a 60, $70 million project. And I was able to put that together. And it was in an area where they were redeveloping downtown West Palm Beach. And it was demand for mixed use residential. And I built a 66 unit condo project with ground floor retail right next to a street called Clematis Street in West Palm Beach, which was being redeveloped with, new restaurants and nightlife and so forth. That was really my first, getting into urban development. I saw the opportunity, first one to build an urban development like that in West Palm Beach. At the time. And yeah, I was young, but I, at that point, I already have built, hundreds of, probably more than hundreds of single family homes. But, if you combine single family homes, apartments are, over 1,000 units, I already had under my belt. So I was able to, I had enough of a track record to raise the capital and get the project funded.
Yeah, for sure. And then you spread other cities, and what a great beginning. And I know one of the concepts you've mentioned for that up and coming developer is sort of don't drink your own Kool-Aid a little bit, because people fall in love with the design and the architecture and it's so exotic. It's so interesting, but the practicality of the pro forma and driving the deal and making sure that you're going to make money and this is going to be successful, balancing that against the excitement. You can talk about how you sort of battled that or managed to push back some of that.
I still battle that. I can't. It's something that's innate. I do still battle that, where you have these incredible designs. When you're sitting and designing, especially you do it a high rise, it's going to stand or skyline, like Miami, for instance. There is times where you're sitting and you're value engineering a building. Your sensible side says, all right, do we really need this? Can we lose it? And then there's the other side is, well, this will stand on the Miami skyline past my time for the next, I don't know, 100 years, 200 years. I don't know. I don't know what's going to be in 100 years, but And so it is challenging to, even at this age, you still, sometimes fall in love with a design or a look. But again, I've learned over the years to manage that where you could get a little of it. I had a theory where, I learned this when I was building single family home communities is you create this really kick-ass, great entrance feature, and you put a little extra money, and it just makes the entire community look luxurious. But you're really only spending money in one remote area. So it's just there's tricks where you can make something look a lot more high end and look like you spent a lot more by looking at certain components of a project and upgrading those components. And so you get kind of that benefit without spending it all the way through the building. And, you see a lot of developers make that mistake where they want everything to look great. And what happens is they run over budget or, they can't make the numbers work. And no, I know there was a Forbes article that I wrote, and that's, fall in love with the numbers, not with your project. And so you do have to put the pro forma first and then find ways to create designs that are favorable, but fit within those budgets.
And I've heard development is just one series of failures after the next, and how much stomach you have for it. And things are always more expensive and take more time than you think that they're going to be. But you certainly completed a ton of projects. Has anything ever gone according to the timeline you set out from the beginning?
If any of my capital groups are listening to this, I'd say they all were perfectly on time and all perfectly on budget. So, it all depends on who your audience is. So
Exactly right.
because
No,
I
but
think I don't know if I represent that exactly. No, I'm kidding. Look, the development business is tough because you're constantly, what happens is because of the time, but, from the time you're looking at a parcel of land, let's say you have to rezone it. You're going through that process. You're going through a design process. Then you're going through either a pre-sales or permitting. And it just takes so long that you start bridging 2, 3, 4 different cycles. And so you're always in different markets. And one single project could literally be in 3 or 4 different markets. So you do have to shift sometimes. You got to remain fluid, and you do have to sometimes shift your game plan based on where that market is at that time. Or sometimes you have to hold back. Real estate is people say location. I mean, you can go through all the different aspects of real estate, but timing is really, I mean, when you're looking at development of real estate timing, that's really where anyone listening to this, you can have the best deal in the worst market or the worst deal in the best market. And I'd rather have a bad deal in a great market because financially, you're just going to do better because of the timing, not because of what you build or what you did. And again, that is important. I'm not discounting building good projects and quality projects, but at the end of the day, from a financial standpoint, timing the market is the most crucial part of the business.
absolutely. The other thing is that even if it's a down market, if you're communicating with your investors and everyone's aware of the macroeconomics at play, you'd rather have a great partner, probably in a down market, perhaps, than a bad, horrible partner in a good market. Who knows? I guess it's philosophical. But having the integrity to communicate and do what's right vis-a-vis your investors, that's really huge. Speaking of really huge, the developments you have going on now are epic. I mean, they're world record setting, literally are changing the skyline in Miami. I know because I was physically in one of your buildings. And I mean, we can jump to talking right about the Legacy Hotel and Residences, which is really, really sort of cutting edge, like the largest lease in downtown Miami, I think, in history, vis-a-vis the healthcare side of it and the joint venture you've done. And
Right.
taking wellness and everything else to an entirely different concept. They wouldn't even define as wellness. I think you created a new category entirely. And maybe you could talk about, maybe it makes sense to start with Paramount first, and then we segue into Legacy Hotel. It's probably the natural order of things. Would you agree?
Yes, Paramount was something I came up with pre the '08 recession. That's how long I've been working on it. What I did is at the time I had some really great sites. One was on the beach, one was across from the American Airlines Arena in downtown Miami. One was which is today Paramount Bay in Edgewater, right on the bay. That was something that I started back then. I had 3 great sites. I was looking at a few other sites, and we felt that there should be some type of synergy between these buildings. And that's really how the Paramount brand started. And I built Paramount Bay at the time, which is in Edgewater, which again, if people know where Edgewater is, it's a neighborhood just north of downtown in Miami, right on the bay. And at the time this was a luxury building with private elevators. flow through units. And at the time, people were just building apartments in those locations because that was a transitional area. People wouldn't believe it if they saw it today. In the early 2000s, that Biscayne corridor in that area was really run down. It was a lot of drugs, prostitution. I mean, it was a bad area. It was a bad neighborhood, and it was in transition. And today it's all upscale condos and apartment projects and so forth. It became actually a very upscale neighborhood now because it all got redeveloped. But at the time, that was pioneering, building luxury. And then, then I built Paramount Lauderdale, and then of course rolled into Paramount Miami World Center. And that was, Paramount Miami World Center. That was the big one. It's right in the center of downtown Miami. It's got a big lighting feature, lights up at night. We light it for holidays, and, New Year's Eve, we have fireworks shows and so forth. And after this is a 1.8 million square foot project, big mixed development right in the center of downtown Miami. And after that, everyone looked at me and says, okay, well, you built this building, for actually most amenities in the world, 46 different amenities. So where do you go from here? What are you going to do next? How do you top this? And that's when Legacy was born. And, Legacy was really looking at where the trends are. And when you look at the future of real estate in general, and it's all the trends, it's hospitality trends, luxury trends, ownership trends. How do people want to own real estate in the future? When you started seeing the Airbnbs and the VRBOs and so forth, people want to own real estate as an investment, although they want flexibility and being able to lease their investment and be able to gain revenue and capitalize on their investment. When you looked at the hospitality industry, lifestyle hospitality was growing 4 times more than any other type of hospitality. So we said, all right, well, they should have a lifestyle component to it. And that's why we brought in, at the time, SBE, who had the SLS Hotel and all the lifestyle brands. SLS, they were running the Delano, the Shore Club in Miami, the Mondrian in LA, and so forth. So they're a great lifestyle brand, and they had a soft brand. And so we brought them in to do the entire lifestyle component. Recently, in the past couple of years, they were actually bought up by Accor. However, they still have a great lifestyle team. So lifestyle, and then of course, luxury hospitality was on the rise as well. And for many reasons, one of them just, there's a big transition of wealth happening in the world right now. There's never been this much wealth being transferred ever in the history of the world. And so there's just demand for luxury product. And then the last part was, you couldn't avoid the trends in wellness. You see these, Canyon Ranch was the first one that started it, but then you see Six Senses, a lot of wellness resorts where people go to the resorts. But, I've been to a couple of these, and, you go there, you kind of force to eat healthy the entire time. So it's a different kind of vacation. I didn't believe people coming to Miami want to eat healthy all the time. However, they want to have the access to it. And so we said, let's bring wellness and so forth as part of the ecosystem of Legacy, but it's not all of it. It's you want to party all night and drink and wake up the next day and eat a burger and fries to absorb all that alcohol in your stomach. You can still order a burger and fries at the Legacy. However, this wellness concept, we joined forces with Blue Zone. And Blue Zones, just to give you background on them, National Geographic's in the early 2000s, they went around the world and they studied populations that lived longer, healthier, happier lives. And you'd think, okay, well, they lived longer because, they had the same diet. As a matter of fact, every location had a completely different diet. So it wasn't just diet. It was everything from how these people moved around, their emotion. It was the relationships they had with family. It was a relationship with the community, their community involvement. So there's a lot of components of why these people were living longer. And then they created the Blue Zone lifestyle, and we're building the first Blue Zone center. So this is going to be a place where you can actually interact with the Blue Zone lifestyle, talk about preventive healthcare. And because they were owned by a major hospital group out of California called Adventist, we also figured we could add some medical components because medical tourism is significantly on the rise. And again, all of this tourism, whether it's medical and wellness, also creates premiums in your ADRs, your average daily rates for hotels. So we felt putting all this under one building, lifestyle, luxury, flexible ownership, wellness, and medical under one building, kind of gives you the best of all worlds. And that's really how Legacy was born.
It really does. And it's so thoughtful. I don't know. I've been to hotels like One South Beach. You're just looking for a chocolate bar. They just don't have it. It's like,
right.
It's very restrictive. The wellness concept can be taken too far. So to have that flexible mindset where one person's going to have the juicer, the smoothie, and one person wants to have a slice of pizza and to be thoughtful. And I think it sounds to me like a brand new asset class. In many ways, it's sort of like has to happen, but that's just the way people are coming together. And you're taking it one step further, really.
Right. And it's true. You made a good point. How many times you're sitting, let's say four people are sitting at lunch or dinner, and one person's ordering a juice and a healthy salad, and the other person's ordering a steak. And that's how we live today. And you know what? The person's ordering the steak. The next day, they may order the juice and the salad because they want a cleaner meal the following day. And so that's really how we live today. And or someone's on a keto diet, and so they're eating the steak because that is their diet. You don't want to exclude anyone, but you don't want to make it where it's just this restrictive diet. You want people to be able to choose. And I think in today's society, the way we live today, people want the ability to choose the way they want to do it. They don't want to be forced into eating a certain food. They'll do it one time, but then they won't come back.
Yeah. Or even medical office to combine with hotel. I'm not sure I've heard of that, to be honest. I don't know if that exists elsewhere, but it just seems so natural that you just combine everything somebody might leave, whether they're traveling or living there, so it's just such a vital component. And I think people are looking for what's next. So it's
It's
very,
true.
very
And
interesting.
the idea was reinforced when you see people travel, they want to get minor surgery. They don't want to be home. If you're getting back surgery or knee surgery, you don't want to be home because when you're home, say you have kids, your kids ask you, you feel like you have to get up, or you feel like you have to do things at home. And so it'd be great if once you have surgery, you could just be away from home. You're not stuck in your home routine, and you feel like you can really rest, recover, and not be part of that. And I think that's a big deal. Also, there's people it's funny, another thing with a friend that came down, and his wife wanted to do some cosmetic surgery, and she didn't want anyone to know. So they came to Florida for 10 days. So then when they got back, she'd be healed and nobody would, you look so great. No one really know what you did. And so Miami's definitely a good place for that.
Yeah, no one wants to walk around with bandages, and if they could be anonymous. It's more than just the wellness and surgical center. I mean, it's absolutely massive, all the other components to it. I mean, anything you can think wellness related does seem to be part of the amenity package. So
Yeah.
congrats. And you mentioned the Paramount earlier on the signage. Jumping back a step, one of the cool things you did was you supported Ukraine and
Yeah.
their defense, and you put a 700-foot tall display with Ukrainian flags and colors. And I think that was like the largest maybe sign at the time, possibly supporting that
It was a
struggle.
great display, and it put Miami on the world. Miami is on the world map. Some of us have been here a long time. We remember Miami when it was still just a little town, and that wasn't that long ago. 30 years ago, Miami didn't have any of this. And so it's come a long way in 30 years. When we saw the video and they have pictures of New York with the Empire State Building, and they have Paris with the Eiffel Tower, and then you have Miami with the Paramount, all sitting side by side. It's a great thing for the city of Miami to have that world recognition when CNN is playing Ukraine, colors all around the world. So it was pretty cool.
Very cool. And one of the things you touched on before was sort of the way technology is changing. And you mentioned things like virtual reality or just the way the world is going. You seem to have a great sense of what's next, which is what all great developers need to have. So I know you put some thought into that and you've been proactive in a variety of ways, but maybe you could talk about how you're thinking about technology today and how it's going to change and what you're excited about or maybe less excited about.
On the technology side, I mean, we're implementing a lot of, and again, my wellness guy can probably talk more about this. I don't know all the lingo when it comes to the wellness, but we're doing a lot of technology within the rooms, anywhere from when you have jet lag, there's certain buttons that you push, and I forgot it's circadian lighting. I'm probably not pronouncing it right, but there's certain lighting that goes within the room that helps you adjust to the time zones. And we're looking at also AI. I think everybody's looking at AI today, how they can implement that. So we are definitely looking at a lot of technologies. During COVID, we were looking at a lot of touchless technologies, air purifiers and so forth. And we are doing a lot of that within the legacy, where we're going to have wellness rooms with air purifying water, your water's purified, everything from lighting to the bedding. The bedding pretty much tells you what kind of night's sleep you got. The mat, just by laying on the mattress, you wake up the next morning and it gives you all types of stats and how you slept. Did you snore? Everything. It kind of records your night's sleep. And there's really nothing you have to do. You literally just lay on this mattress and you wake up the next morning and it gives you that data. So a lot of cool technologies out there that we're going to be incorporating into our projects.
Very, very cool. Maybe you could talk a little bit about, I mean, this podcast is called The Dealmaker's Edge, and people just saying, oh, that's great. Built some massive project, bought the property, the financing. But as we talked about earlier, there's an enormous amount of challenges in major development. You've seen tons. I'm sure you'll continue to see many, but what are you telling yourself? Or what would you talk to somebody? What would you tell somebody rather who's growing in their development chops? They're becoming more and more entrenched and they've got, a far road ahead, but you've seen a lot and you're doing stuff on a really major scale. How about the mental health aspect? I mean, how do you talk to yourself on very challenging days when there's some massive delay that no one could prevent it?
Yeah.
There's the knee-jerk reactions, which we all do, bang the desk
Yeah.
and such, but obviously you're a long-term thinker and you're thinking through cycles in the future. So, how do you keep your head on straight when you do these major scale projects? And I'm sure it's not easy.
You asked two questions. The first question was, how do you stay in this business? I always like to use an old story, and we all learned when we were kids, right? The three little pigs. We all remember the three little pigs, the pig that built the straw house and the wood house and then the brick house. And, what I learned it the hard way is if you're not living in a brick house, you're not going to make it in this business because the big bad wolf is going to come and it's going to blow your house down and it's going to happen. And so be able to ride these cycles, you got to be well capitalized. You got to not be over leveraged. You have to be in a position where if things go wrong, you're able to survive through some of these issues. And that's why I use the analogy of being in the brick house is really the only way you could survive long-term in this business. And so my advice is don't over leverage yourself. Don't put yourself in a position. And I'm not going to tell you that I didn't do it. There was a couple of times I got my house blown down. Hence, why I started working on my brick house a while ago. As I got older, I started putting certain, let's just say, backstops and so forth in place in case things did go wrong. The second part, the stress aspect of it, I'm not going to lie to you and tell you I don't get stressed out. After all these years, I still do get stressed out. It's a very stressful business. It's one of the most imperfect business. Imagine you're taking material from all around the world and you're assembling it into this 50-story high rise in the middle of the city. How could it not go wrong, right? When you're doing that, and then you're also trying at the same time market it and capitalize it and deal with rules and regulations and permits and, everything. There's so many things that can go wrong along the way. And so it's all about expectations. I think people going into this business, a lot of people think, oh yeah, I'll just do it. I'll hire a contractor and put it together and I got a great project. I'm drinking their own Kool-Aid. Everything's going to be great. Everything's going to work out. And what you have to do is you have to expect that really nothing's going to work out. Everything's not going to go right. And you hope for the best, right? And plan for the worst. And so every time you move forward, you have to look at every component, what could go wrong. Due diligence in a project is crucial. You see a lot of people just make mistakes right off the bat. I mean, you make your money on the buy. It's that first buy is where you make your money. Sometimes you see people just jump too quickly into a project. They get excited about it. They think it's going to work. They don't do enough due diligence to determine, is there a market for the product? Is this going to work? Am I going to be able to get the zoning or the permitting or, whatever else I'm going to need to build this project? It's a lot of planning. It's a lot of due diligence. It's digging into those details is crucial. And that saves a lot, but then there is a lot of things that will go wrong and you just have to expect them to go wrong and you can't overreact. Take a deep breath. And there's, the old saying, right? Where if you can't find a door, look for a window. Or you can't find a window, look for a crawl space out of there. But you got to persevere and perseverance is big and you got to find ways to get around these problems.
Well said, well articulated. I'm sure people will really appreciate hearing that. Anything additional you wish I would have asked you, but I didn't? Obviously, we can go down so many tangents and I want to respect your time, but anything else you think we should talk about?
I don't know. There's a lot to talk about in this business. If your listeners are people that want to get into the business, my advice is, and I've been on panels where people ask me, what do I do? How do I get in? And I always tell people, I said, look, best thing to do is find a deal. And, now that I can't say we're in a recessionary period, we're kind of in this limbo period between having a great market and a market that there's a lot of uncertainty. But let's assume that things in real estate are not going to go as well, let's say over the next 12 months or so. It's a good time for people that have not been in the business. I always tell people, look for a good project, look for a good, good deal, a good site, something you can get terms on. Right now, let's say a landowner might be sitting on a site. They don't have a buyer for it because developers are saying, look, we're not taking on any new projects. That's a good chance for you to come in, lock up a piece of land that might be a great parcel when the market rebounds. And now you're sitting on something. And then what you could do is you could take that site and you can find a developer. It happened to me where a person didn't have the experience, but they locked up a good project. They presented it to me and they said, look, I'd like to stay in the deal. I'd like to work, build my track record, build my career, but I need someone to back me, someone with a track record. Obviously, I'm not gonna be able to capitalize this project because I don't have the track record. And so that's a way to where you do it. And, after you do a couple of projects like that, suddenly you do have a track record. And now suddenly you have delivered a couple of projects. Of course, you have to execute. And at that point, you can start raising capital. Lenders will start paying attention to you because, they see that you have a track record. At that point, maybe you've built yourself somewhat of a balance sheet. You're bankable. So those are probably the best advice I have is it all comes down to a project. Find a really, really good project. Find a way to tie it up, find a way to bring that project to reality, be part of that project and build yourself a track record and get the experience.
Amazing, Dan. This conversation has been fantastic and can't wait to have people listen to it and give us critical feedback and say how much they've learned from listening. So I guess from here, we'll wrap it up. And again, Dan, I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be on the podcast.
Great. Well, thank you. And I enjoy the conversation.
Thank you for joining the Dealmaker's Edge. Don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Give us a 5-star rating so more people can follow the conversation.